Have you ever noticed that time zones look really weird? Not just in this map, but in all the maps you've seen before. There are these odd lines going through places that seem completely random. So why do time zones look like this? And what do these lines mean? When we think of time zones, we imagine a clock divided into 12 segments, one for each hour, and then every 15 degrees of longitude, we change the clock by 1 hour. And that's true. The Earth is divided into 24 time zones, each separated by 15 degrees, and it's also true that if you travel east or west, you will eventually have to move your watch's hands forward or backward by an hour when you cross those time zone lines. But it's not true that time zones are simple lines. In reality, they look like this: a patchwork quilt of irregular lines dividing the planet into 40 different pieces. And it might seem random, but there's a reason behind every line. Time zones were never designed to be continuous.
They are human creations, decided by whoever was in charge at a given place and time.
This means that every time zone line tells the story of who was in power, when, and where. The best example of this is France.
When France had colonies, they used their home time, which was set in Paris, wherever they were.
So, French-speaking countries still use French time, even though it doesn't make much sense geographically. Like take Gabon and Reunion Island. They're 9 hours apart, but they both use Central European time. Or Equatorial Guinea and French Guiana. They be only 1 hour apart, but again they use different time zones, because one follows Paris time and the other follows Brussels time. It gets more complicated too. Like in Brazil, before it was independent, it followed Portuguese time. After independence, it adopted Rio time, which was 3 hours behind. Then, during World War II, it moved to Brasilia time, 5 hours behind, and then finally back to Rio time after the war. So time zone lines often follow country borders, but not always. Sometimes they go right through countries. The most famous example of this is the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan. They're divided by a 4.5-hour time difference, even though they share a border and were once part of the same country. But this isn't a recent development. Even before Pakistan was independent, British India was split in two, with the time at the border being 1 hour ahead in India and 4.5 hours ahead in Afghanistan. The reason why is pretty straightforward. Most people in Afghanistan face west towards Iran and take their sunset to start their day. But Iranian time didn't work for Pakistan, which faced east towards India. These differences also affect how time zones are defined inside countries. In much of the Middle East, the entire country follows the time of its biggest city. So, while Amman, Jordan is only 45 minutes away from Tel Aviv, Israel, the two countries are 2 hours apart because Israel follows Jerusalem time. In Africa, this means that while Tanzania is only 45 minutes away from Zambia, they're 3 hours apart because Tanzania follows East African time while Zambia follows Zambian time. And in Europe, this means that while Serbia is only 30 minutes away from Budapest, Hungary, they're 1 hour apart because Serbia follows Belgrade time. And we can see this patchwork quilt effect everywhere. Cities close to each other but in different time zones don't just exist in the developing world. Take New York and Toronto, only 600 miles away, or about 1,000 kilometers. They're 5 hours apart. Or London and Lisbon, only 300 miles away, or about 500 kilometers. They're 2 hours apart. Or Los Angeles and Vancouver, only 130 miles away, or 210 kilometers. They're 3 hours apart. Heck, sometimes cities within the same country are in different time zones. Take Honolulu and American Samoa, both U.S. territories. They're 2,600 miles away, or about 4,200 kilometers. And they're 5 hours apart. While American Samoa follows Samoan time, Honolulu follows Hawaiian time. So, why does this happen? Why aren't places close to each other in the same time zone? The first reason has to do with history. As we mentioned earlier, when powerful countries colonized other lands, they forced their time onto the local population. That's why many countries in South America follow times based on their European colonizers. But it wasn't just colonizers that did this. It was anyone who was in power. For example, Alaska followed 2 different time zones depending on whether it was controlled by Russia or the United States. Even today, small changes in power can make big changes to time zones. Take Bangladesh. Until 1955, it followed Indian time. Then it became its own country, but kept the same time. Then, in 1965, it decided to move to Bangladesh time, half an hour ahead of Indian time, in order to get an extra hour of daylight in the winter. The second reason is geography. Places with different climates need different lifestyles. Like people in the Arctic Circle need to wake up when the sun rises and go to sleep when the sun sets, while people further south can stay up later and sleep in longer. But even if you divide the world into places with similar climates, you still get different time zones. Take the Faroe Islands. These islands are closer to each other than any two places that share the same time zone. They're located halfway between Scotland and Iceland, but they follow Icelandic time, 1 hour ahead of Greenwich Mean Time. Or take Jarvis Island and Baker Island. These two islands are only 300 miles away, or about 500 kilometers, and they're 14 hours apart. Even more extreme is the Philippines. Their time is 9.5 hours ahead of Indonesia, even though the distance between the two countries is only about 800 miles, or about 1,300 kilometers. That's only about half the distance between New York and Toronto, yet the time difference is twice as large. And this brings us to our final reason: convenience. Sometimes you just want to make things easier. This is why Ireland and Great Britain switched from following each other to being an hour apart. And this is why Greenland follows 2 different time zones. And this is why Arizona doesn't observe daylight saving time. It simply makes life easier for everyone involved. But this raises another question. If the entire point of time zones is to keep the time consistent with the sun, why don't we just have 2 time zones, one for places where the sun rises and sets early, and one for places where it rises and sets late? Well, we actually do have 2 time zones, just not for places that are far away from each other. Take Hawaii and American Samoa. They follow 2 different time zones, even though they're only 2,600 miles away, or about 4,200 kilometers. The reason is that Hawaii follows the sun during the summer, and American Samoa follows the sun during the winter. During the summer, it gets dark later in Hawaii, so having Hawaiian time means more daylight hours. During the winter, it gets dark earlier in American Samoa, so having Samoan time means more daylight hours. What this means is that time zones don't just tell the time, they tell the story of an entire planet. Every line is a reminder of who was in power, when, and where, how climate affects culture and the decisions people make, and how sometimes it's just easier to move the clock. Now that you know why time zones look the way they do, it's time to learn about the funniest place on planet Earth, the International Dateline. Click here to learn why the world ends in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Or click here to watch another video. Wait, don't click anywhere. You should definitely subscribe if you haven't already. And as always, thanks for watching.